introduce everybody. Everybody's kind of talked already, but I'm Ben Penner, and I am I wear a number of hats. I'm a farmer, live in St. Peter, and didn't grow up here. Moved here, started a farm, and I'm working with Dan Kaufman, who is bucking bales over there on his Kernza and some other things. And so what I do is I just farm not that many acres between sort of LaSure County, Scott County, and where I live. And I'm trying to sort of do a direct-to-customer kind of flower. I know Jason's a customer of mine, and trying to essentially, add the value to the crop by milling it and distributing it, doing it that way, and essentially bringing kind of flavor back to wheat flour. So, long story short, I'm working with Brad Gordon with Great River Greening, and we're organizing farmers, especially to work with Forever Green Initiative crops from the University of Minnesota, which includes a number of crops, Kernza and camelina, hazelnuts, and some other perennial crops that are being developed. So tonight's agenda, basically, we're waiting for kind of the main guy to show up, but Carmen Fernholz is really probably the most how do you describe Carmen? He's a
proactive.
He's a proactive guy.
I don't know. You're pretty proactive though.
I don't know. I just keep moving. That's all. So, he's one of the original sort of organic farmers and started an organization called O Farm, sort of a marketing cooperative for organic crops, and is an experienced grower of Kernza, which means he's been growing it since I think 2011 or something like that. And so, just he offered to come out and do sort of a pre-harvest check, and so then I thought, well, let's just let's invite a bunch of other people out and see who might be interested in participating. So I don't know, Brad, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah. So Brad Gordon, I'm with Great River Greening. So the two of us are here. So we work with Ben here in the watershed in the area. Great River Greening's been working in 7 Mile Creek here in Nicollet County for a while, doing watershed work, just trying to help with conservation practices across the watershed. But yeah, here we partner with Nick Jordan from the University of Minnesota, trying to work on a third crop in the rotation, trying to create a market and everything, not just focusing on the conservation practice side of it. We also are looking at the economic and crop side and everything. So looking at stuff that's beneficial, not just for soil and water, but also for the sustainability of the farm. So that's kind of our role as an organization. And then tonight you're going to notice Liz has got a camera up most of the time. Don't be intimidated. We're not like posting it widespread on media or anything. This is mostly just so we can kind of capture the questions and the answers for everyone who couldn't make it tonight, especially with everything that's going on, people kind of staying home more often. We wanted to at least have some sort of eyes on the group. So it's pretty minimal kind of stuff that we're broadcasting and everything. It's just kind of, we're going to post the link probably once Liz does her magic to the videos, and then people can kind of check out the questions and answers. So I've got like a list of questions that I might pull like Colin and Ben and everyone aside at the end if I still have some questions, so we can potentially get recorded for those who couldn't make it tonight. But so that's what the cameras are up for. It's mostly just for those who couldn't really make it to this huddle tonight. So that's kind of the background on that. Liz, did you want to add anything on the
I'm just here to record stuff.
Staying behind the camera.
I have not a lot to share about Kernza as far as expertise.
It's awesome.
That's me.
Colin? Yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Colin Puritan. Worked at the University of Minnesota with a group called the Forever Green Initiative. perennial and winter annual crops for the upper Midwest. I work as a supply chain development specialist, so those crops have all been they're still in a basic research phase for the last 10, 15 years. Kernza is really the first one that is being launched out of that portfolio. So my job is to focus on variety releases, scaling seed supply, siting of new production acres, and developing the supply chains that will bring it to market. And so I've been working with Ben and a lot of other growers on the first variety of Kernza was released in 2019 called MN Clearwater. As you maybe heard from Ben or seen elsewhere, Kernza is pretty interesting because it's the world's first perennial grain crop. So we can talk a whole lot more about it, but it's still in very early stage. Think about the first variety of any crop ever released, like the first soybean, right? We got a long way to go, but we've been in this basic research phase, and now we're able to launch out into an early commercial phase, and the field you're going to see is part of that. So, yeah, thanks for putting this together, Ben. And I also feed my family Ben Penner flour.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's appreciate it.
I'm Neil Anderson. I'm a small family seed operation about 3 miles west of here. Friends with Dan Kaufman, the producer, and we've gotten to know him and just interested in the route Kernza is going to take.
Sounds great.
Yeah, Doug Schultz. I live at Turner to Churn Farm on 111, 7 miles north of Nicollet. I've been growing small grains and cutting small grains for 50-some years, I reckon. I've done a custom swathing business, so I think I've cut at least 5,000 acres, maybe more. I've worn out 8 swathers. Maybe I better say 8,000 acres. This year I've cut about 300 acres of oats and wheat in Sibley County, Nicollet County, and Stewart County. So I've get around that way. Mainly I was a dairy farmer until 1993. Sold breeding stock. I also are using Ben's flour. My wife makes her own bread. She likes it. Thank you.
That's great.
Chase Marty, assistant brewmaster at August Shell Brewing Company. Also starting Black Frost Distilling Company in New Ulm. Still a work in progress yet, but for Shells, I've been working for the past 6 or 7 years now on trying to bring small grain, specifically barley production, back to southern Minnesota. We just harvested 150 acres on Friday. I didn't, the Giesecke family did, 2-row barley, and just kind of a big believer in the environmental aspect of it, and trying to bring different small grains back to the area. Also from adding a terroir aspect of agriculture into beer and spirits. I'm a member of the board member on the American Malting Barley Association. I work with raw malting quite a bit on doing some custom malting with our local grains here, and that's where I got my introduction to Kernza, was through them. They had their VP is growing some.
Oh, really? Okay.
Jesse Tice.
Huh. Okay.
And so I had some of their, they did some test maltings of it, and I've also talked to some other brewers that have tried to use it, so I had some feedback, just from my experiences and their experiences. So definitely something I'm interested in, from a brewing side of things, spirit side of things, and just agriculture as well. And yeah, I make sourdough bread with your flour.
That's great. Well, so what I really brought you here today for.
I got some flour in my trunk.
Right, yeah. No Carmen?
I brought beer as well. So.
Yeah, there's beer. I mean, we can certainly.
I tried to stop by and grab some Kernza beers, but they have them at the Birchwood Cafe, but I think they're closed today. And so you have to get curbside ahead of time. But from Bang Brewery, they've got it. You can.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
Come on.
Well, there's such a good story to tell with Kernza. I mean,
for sure.
it would be amazing to have a brewery like yours using Kernza. So yeah. Well, let's walk to the field. I think. Dan planted. He gave me some notes too. He planted this last fall. Planted it on the 7th of September. 13 pounds per acre. He put 2 tons of chicken manure on it in October.
It's organic
And-
field?
What's that?
Certified organic?
It's not. It's transitional, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a pretty nice stand overall. You walk
Clover
out
was-
in it.
Did he put clover with it, or is that just random clover?
That was from, I think it's random clover. He had a turnip crop, I think, some kind of cover crop last summer.
Okay. Gonna last. The stand's gonna last for how long?
3 years. 3 years, yeah.
Well, you can get a grain yield out of it for 3 years. It would keep on producing. A forage crop can stand for a decade or more, but as far as commercial grain production, usually after the third year, take it out. That's the breeders and agronomists their main goal is trying to maintain that grain yield over time. So trying to figure out, do they cultivate between rows? Do they, how do they manage for that?
So 2 years ago, they were talking about how it takes more than 2 years to get a good grain crop. Is that true, or like the first year? What's the yield gonna be?
I don't know.
I mean, it looks good. I mean,
looks good. It looks pretty good, all things considered.
yeah.
No, you can definitely I think a lot of times what happened is like planting time was late. People didn't have best management practices, so they didn't get a good yield the first year. And then they said, "Oh well, Kernza doesn't produce in the first year." It's like,
yeah. There were a lot of rumors kind of
Carmen
passing
can
around.
tell you about his experience, but he got a great yield the first year
Yeah.
from his 2019 production.
Also, he's gonna go organic. He's gotta have a.
So the plan is, Dan and I bought that swather, that old swather sitting right there. I just pulled it in the field, and I've been using it on wheat. And it's kind of one of those old school. He got it in North Dakota. He had a buddy. There's a bunch of them sitting around, so he went and got that. And well, Carmen can tell us, but I guess sort of when it dries down, I don't know what, 2/3 of the head. So I don't know where we are now, but we're getting there. Swath it down and then use a pickup head to get kind of a lot of stuff in there, and then it has to be de-hulled from there. Have you seen a Kernza field before?
No, well, I've seen this one.
Seen this one? Okay.
Is ergot much of a problem?
Can be
Can be.
in a wet year.
Okay.
Small grain.
Yeah.
Susceptible to similar issues. We
Is it
saw.
hard to separate for.
What's that?
Is it hard to separate the ergot out, or?
So I mean, you can color sort it, but also sometimes you can't get a good read on mycotoxins until it's dehulled. So that's kind of a tricky thing.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's noticeable, like ergot and other small grains, so you can color sort it out. But also we saw that it doesn't necessarily have the same discoloration as a lot of other small grains, which, is something to, that we got to deal with. The free threshing, the threshability rate is going up in all the breeding program, which will, bring the processing costs down. We're about 60% free threshing right now.
Must be Carmen.
So is much issue with shattering that?
Shattering's way reduced. It does mature from the head down, so that's an issue. Like you see a still pretty substantial green stem.
Yeah.
If you waited until the stem was dried down, the top would be shattering. So timing, Carmen can speak to it, but yeah, timing is definitely a challenge. But the shattering is way lower than it used to be, so they really improved that trait, making a lot of good breeding gains.
So I will say, personal story, sort of, first time I heard about Kernza, so I grew up in central Kansas. I mentioned not from Minnesota originally, but grew up in central Kansas, about a half an hour from the Land Institute. I don't know if you've heard of the Land Institute at all. They're the ones that started breeding Kernza 30-some odd years ago. Or they didn't call it Kernza, I don't know what they just perennial
Wheatgrass.
wheatgrass, yeah.
Intermediate wheatgrass.
Yeah, and so the Land Institute is this kind of, is, at least among some conventional producers, kind of like, well, what are they doing up there? They're doing some, interesting stuff. We don't really, fully understand what's going on there. And so I visited and talked to the geneticists. This was in, I think, 2005 or so, or 6. And so they told me kind of some backstory. So I saw some of the early versions of the wheatgrass that they were working on in the lab back then. And there's a guy, our neighbor actually, from Marion County, Kansas, grew the very first intermediate wheatgrass outside the lab. So, and there's a little triangle, less than the triangle that we're standing on right here. And it's still growing there. I went and checked about 4 weeks ago. So I've kind of had interest in Kernza and sort of what the promise of the crop has been since then. So, just meeting Colin and Connie and folks from the Forever Green Initiative is kind of exciting to be out here in one of the very first fields. There's Carmen.
Hey, did you stop and get a beer?
I should have.
Yeah, it's right there in the cooler. I'll get you one.
Carmen likes beer, I know that. So
We'll get one. We'll get one to you.
If you were going to cut it for hay, when would you all cut it? How long ago? Quite a while back already? Or when would you?
You can take a spring hay cutting and still get a grain yield.
Oh.
So you can cut, but the timing is tricky. Usually, you just take the straw. You guys are adding some cattle, right? And you're looking at grazing it. Yeah. So.
Does it hurt the yield quite a bit to take?
They found that if you time it right, it doesn't impact the grain yield, and in some cases it can bump the grain yield. But it's tricky timing, narrow timing. So mostly it's you take the straw at the end. There's a lot of straw. You can.
How does it cut? Is it hard on a sickle or does it cut you?
I tell you what, we're gonna find out in a couple of days. It's got a brand new sickle on it. Carmen was just saying that me and the farmer, Dan Kaufman, we just bought that in North Dakota.
Great.
So that thing's gonna work.
I used to cut flax, and I hope it don't cut like that does.
We just cut ours yesterday, and this was 2-year-old stuff. Cuts.
Easy, huh?
See, the stem is grass green when you cut it, so it cuts real easily.
Oh, good.
And then the other thing is, we cut it yesterday, and Luke is harvesting it today.
Is it really?
Hey.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Because rain's.
That's why I'm late.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good reason. Thanks for.
Because I had to help him get the combine adjusted because we're using a cylinder combine this year instead of the rotor.
Okay.
And so we had to make sure that it was doing it, and it doesn't get it as clean as the rotor.
Okay.
It gets it in there, but there's more hulls on it. But that's where we had to get it set. But anyway, what we're going to do, and you guys, anybody could do it, you cut it, and if you can harvest it the next day, you could take the straw and actually use it as forage. There would be some feed value in that shit.
Okay.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Doesn't look like.
Or leave it dry out and it makes good bedding.
I think this is Pat.
Right?
Yeah, it was just this.
Oh.
There's a couple of people who haven't. So we're going to introduce you here. We tried to introduce you, but we couldn't come up with the right words. So we need you to do it yourself. But we've all kind of introduced here a little bit. Thanks for journeying. Carmen came all the way from Madison to be with us a couple hours, and Dan Kaufman, the guy who farms this, he's making hay right in the next field. He's got to do it before the rain, so he's not here. But maybe you can meet him later or something. But
Sure.
This is Pat, pretty sure. Come on.
What's going on?
Did you get a beer?
Over this year, but farmed with him and me about 500 acres, organic, near Madison, Minnesota. And my history with Kernza goes back to 2011, when Don Wise gave me about 2 pounds, or I shouldn't say 2 pounds, he gave me enough to plant about 2 acres. And then we did research over those next 5 or 6 years, trying to determine what to do with it, how it grows, how it stands, doesn't stand. And then in 2018, Colin and Don and the university got me enough seed for 15 acres of the released the Minnesota Clearwater variety that the university developed. And I imagine this is the same stuff.
This is Clearwater, yeah.
Yeah. And so we harvested the first Clearwater on our farm last year at, I think, real close to 800 pounds an acre, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Right. And
So you got the high water mark. I didn't know that. Wow.
Jake tells me
That's
he's catching
great.
up. He swapped Rosemount.
Yeah?
And he said he's close to 750, but he
Good.
doesn't have a clear read on it yet. That's
Okay.
a year 2 stand, but
year
sorry.
2, yeah.
Continue.
Okay, but anyway, that's the history of it. And then we've been trying to determine when to cut it. And it doesn't seem like the year 2 heads are arching as much as the year 1. And we spent, oh golly, I know we've been out in the field 5 or 6 times in the last week, just trying to determine whether it's ready or not. And we could get ripe kernels on a green head, and on the dry heads, they were about the same.
Okay.
And what we would take some of the kernels way on the bottom and see what their maturity was, and it looked virtually the same as way on top.
Okay.
And we tried to do the moisture sampling with the microwave, and what we got, to the best of our knowledge, was about 22%.
Okay.
And when I read what Jake had done last week, he said they were going to cut at 22 to 25%. Based on that, and based on the experience that we had yesterday and today, cutting and now harvesting today, I think it's a goal. The one thing we're finding with the cylinder combine rather than the rotor combine is that we are seeing a few more unthreshed parts of the seed heads. I didn't notice that much last year, but I also noticed that we didn't have much, if any, of the little broken off stems, you know, the green stuff. And so in that respect, it really looks like the rotor is good, except it didn't get the grain as much dehulled as the rotor did last year.
Okay.
So there wasn't what they call as much free threshing. But what I told Luke before I left is I said, I don't care if it's got a hull on it, I want it in the hopper, because then I've got it. What we did, and my wife suggested this, we had this leaky little kid's swimming pool. Because we were wondering how we could catch something out of the combine on the back to see what was coming out. So she said, take that out there. So Luke went in the combine and I trotted behind, catching everything that was coming out the back.
Yeah.
And that's what really determined how good we thought we were doing. And I think that's critical, especially when you're new with it, to really figure out what is and isn't coming over the back.
Was it thrown over, or how was it doing?
The first time it was, but we had the wind up higher.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we had the wind up too high, and we put the wind on. This is a 6620 Titan 2. We put the wind down at 580.
Okay.
And that seemed to do it. It seemed to take the straw out. What we did before we went out there, the bottom sieve.
Yeah.
After corn, some corn, broken off corn cobs get caught in that bottom sieve, so you can't tighten it way down. So we had to take the sieves out and clean all that out, and then we could really clamp that bottom sieve down tight.
Okay.
And the top sieve almost wide open.
Okay.
And then the speed at 580 on the wind, cylinder at something over 1100, and the concave's tight shut.
So you want it fast. Does that break it off a lot at the cylinder, or would that get you what you want?
I want it fast for the reason, and my dad always told me this because he grew up with threshing machines, and he says you want that cylinder running as fast as you can so you get as many impacts on that grain as you can for the short period of time that it's going through.
Yeah.
And then the other thing he said, and we worked on this too, is you want threshing grain on grain. Not grain on metal, but grain on grain. And that's a critical thing for keeping that cylinder tight.
Yeah.
And what I told Luke to do, and I think it helped, is I told him to run it just to move along just a little bit faster to get a little more material into that threshing mechanism. And hopefully that would thresh even more of those broken heads off, is what we're hoping.
Are you combining this, Pat?
I don't know. I'm probably.
Okay.
You better listen.
It'll be a red machine probably. So.
Red, green, I'm colorblind. No.
How much does a bushel weigh? Does it have a test weight like oats or?
Well, we don't really know yet.
Okay.
It depends on how much pre-threshing comes in, right? Because you got a lot of hulls in there. It's going to weigh a lot less.
Yeah.
So people have said anywhere from 20 to 30 pounds.
Right, and I think that's to be determined, the whole test weight thing.
Okay.
Right.
Still in a
It's
pounds
so
per
new.
acre.
What's that?
Still in a pounds per acre space.
Right, still on the pounds per acre too,
Okay.
right. Yep, right. So that's a quick rundown of what we just did the last 2 days.
Okay.
And last year we found out the same thing. We cut it one day, and then we had a rotor combine, and we started harvesting the next day.
So do you think, is that emerging as best practice, you think, or is it just the scenarios that we're running into?
2 years experience, I think it is the best practice for several reasons. Number one, when we cut that Kernza yesterday, those stems were this green.
Got it.
And he started cutting at about 1 o'clock. I went out there about 7 o'clock, about a little earlier than this, and those green stems were already a pale green.
Wow.
And that was only 3 or 4 hours in the sun. And this afternoon when we were threshing, I could take a wad and they would crack.
Okay.
They wouldn't get like a rope, they would break off.
Well, that's nice then, if we can just knock it down and pick it right back up.
And that I would hope be a practice as well, so that you can watch the weather.
Yeah.
You can play the weather a lot better that way.
You cut it right on the ground when you swath it?
What we did last year is cut it high because we weren't interested in the straw.
Uh-huh.
This year we cut it at about 7 to 8 inches on
Okay.
average, because there's a couple of people that wanted some straw, and we're going to be putting in some cows here in about a month, and we're going to need some straw this winter ourselves.
Okay.
So, and it looks like it should be some really nice straw.
Does it leave a good stubble for the windrow, or does it like to fall through, or does it stay on top?
It seemed to stay right on top. It really stayed right on top. I was real happy with that, because our stubble was, like that, at least. Maybe some of it a little taller, but it stayed right on top. Right. So, hopefully, I think still the ideal would be a stripper head, because you save that one pass,
Yeah.
so you're potentially saving more seed.
Okay.
And I think you get a cleaner seed based on what we experienced last year. Now, I'm going to keep in touch with Edgerton and Pipestone. Pipestone's going to swath theirs. Edgerton's going to use the stripper head again, so we'll get a good look at how that's coming out. Yeah.
Well, we've kind of got a who's who here. So, Carmen Jace is with assistant brewer with Shell's
Okay.
Brewery.
In New
Shell's
Orleans?
Brewery in New Ulm, and then started a distillery. So interested from.
And I'm a dairy farmer. I was a dairy farmer. Well, I thought I'd quit dairy farmer and take up swathing grain, but about that same time, there wasn't much grain to cut at. Yeah.
Liz and Brad are with.
Inspected it just last week, so it could qualify for seed if we wanted it. Right.
Yeah, so in that first year of increase, we planted 100 acres. 15 of it ended up going for grain, because there was an opportunity to do so. And 85 resulted in about 24,000 pounds of seed that we have clean, bagged, ready to go. And partner Minnesota Native Landscapes cleaned that seed in Foley, and they'll be distributing it on behalf of the U of M right now. We're taking the orders and getting seed out the door.
Should be this month, right?
Yeah, right now.
Doorstep?
Yep.
Yeah.
So this year there's about 1,000 acres, right?
There'll be
Or-
yet to see, but
Sorry, there's 100 acres in right now.
yeah, there's
And-
about 300 to 400 acres of commercially eligible Kernza, which is like nothing, right? It's
Yeah.
and we're going to increase that to anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500, which in the grand scheme of grain is not a lot, but that's like a threefold increase, and then we could do that doubling or tripling probably for a couple of years. We don't want to shoot the moon on production, as we've talked a lot about, but we could. I think we need to double or increase substantially just to establish it as a grain in the market.
So there's a substantial percentage right here in this field.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
We
so
licensed
this is important work right here.
maybe 10 growers last year, and Dan was one of them. So, and now we'll maybe license 30 this year. But we're not trying to do the hemp like 50 to 800. Bad idea.
Yeah.
So this was planted a year ago.
On the 7th of September, 13 pounds an acre. Why, Pat, did you plant it? Okay.
Yeah, to help Dan.
How did that go?
It was, I think it went pretty good. Yeah.
Use the Great Plains, right?
Yeah. I don't know, a little more trash than when he didn't get it quite worked up like he quite wanted, but
What row spacing did you use?
6 inch.
6 inch.
Does it continue the stool out?
Yes, it does.
So it does, you're gonna get a heavier stand with time.
Right, but that's the downside as well. What happens is it starts stooling so much and what starts sodding in, so you get a lot of growth but decrease in seed heads.
Okay.
They usually say it peaks in the second year and third year is pretty good yet, but after that it seems to drastically go. But the thing that really got my attention with our conference call a couple weeks ago with Lee DeHaan is that they're finding in Kansas, after the fourth year, it seems to pick up again on yield. So back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
How do you terminate it when you're done? What do you kill it off with herbicide, plow it, or leave it, or how do you when you're done with it?
Depending on your system.
Yeah.
For me, it would have to be a tillage system.
Yeah.
But for others, well, I should tell you how I terminated that 2-acre patch. When I did it about 3 years ago, I just took a good tandem disc, and I had mowed it off, and just took a good tandem disc and ran through it. I think just 2 times, and it was in. And the crazy thing is, I did it in the late summer, hoping that it would reseed itself, but it didn't. And in fact, then the weeds just came
Okay.
like gangbusters the following year. Because it was a plot, I was just leaving it do what it would do. But that tandem disc did a great job on terminating it. Right.
If anybody's interested, I've got photos. I take a lot of photos. And I can't share them all, but well, no, that's what I'm saying.
Maybe not the best, huh?
I've come to figure that grow Kernza on any field where you would want to get a good yield of wheat. I mean, you can run it on your marginal land, but I don't think you should skimp on just thinking it's going to put it on your marginal land. No. Use it as a regular productive crop on some of your best acres. That's what we've done, and I really, really think that's the approach.
Well, if you're getting 800 pounds an acre,
Right,
that sounds good.
right. Yeah, we've got a little price discovery work to do yet.
Yeah, I think so.
But
We're working on that. Yeah.
that's right.
Were you able to sell your crop last year?
Yes, I sold mine last year. In fact, HFI bought everything.
Okay.
And then Colin and them wanted some at the university because they were going to send some out for market development. And what did I say? We come up with $3 a pound?
Less than that. Well, no. Yeah, I mean, your situation was that kind of two-tiered thing. But
Oh yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we're in the price discovery process. But
Well,
just as you hear the 800 pounds per acre, 500 pounds per acre doesn't sound like a lot. The value of this is a different story. right?
conversations I've had with buyers
Okay.
and trying to come at this point, I think 3 to 4 is okay. you know.
I hope we get in that discussion there.
You mean at the retail end? You talking about, or out of the field?
I think out of the, maybe a little lower out of the field, but yeah, no, I think higher is better,
I agree.
in my opinion.
I agree.
I think we'll be talking about that in the morning.
Tomorrow morning, yeah.
I've crunched some numbers. I'm not going to give them away tonight, but I crunched some numbers 4 different ways: conventional and organic.
Yeah.
And just for discussion's sake, what I've always felt is organic. I've got to be able to be competitive with corn and soybeans. So that to me has to be something around a minimum of $1,000 an acre gross.
Yeah.
And then
That's what I figured.
on top of that, so I want to plug in compensation for ecosystem services. And so that's why it probably is going to be more than $1,000 an acre for organic.
Yeah.
But I hope we can get into that conversation in the morning.
Yeah.
And I'll share some of those numbers with you.
Well, so I don't know what other questions there might be, but where are we with this crop?
I'll give you just a farmer's opinion.
Yeah.
I think, I used to say when we got started that we were 10 years away from really getting it. I think if things move like they are, and what I've been experiencing, and Luke and I have been experiencing, you said Jake just said they're just about pushing 800 there at the research station. 5 years from now, I think we're going to be in a really good position, provided we keep developing the market. I think we can get the acreage and the production now, but we want to, in my opinion, keep it absolutely in balance. We don't want to get one where we got a bunch in the bin and we can't move it, or the buyer wants a whole bunch and we can't supply it. Keeping that, and that's why Colin and Connie are really working at the university and TLI as well on developing markets.
Where is the breeding program for next variety?
2022 at the earliest, but that's 2 years away. Anywhere between 2022 and 2024. But they've got a full breeding pipeline going on that the next, I think, 2 generations of candidates have been identified. So it's like any other breeding program. They're going to keep a continuous program so long as they can fund it. But yeah, probably every 3 to 5 years they put a new variety out. And the breeding, because Jim calls it the honeymoon phase of breeding this crop, you know. Been breeding wheat for like thousands of years, been breeding Kernza for 30 years. So you can make gains a lot faster. It's all non-GMO, but using the modern, just standard breeding methods and like genome sequencing kind of stuff, they can make gains very, very quickly. So they've been showing anywhere from, I think, 3 to 5% yield gains per year almost, which is, you don't get that in any other standard crop because it's early on.
Yeah. Yield gain, standability, they've really eliminated a lot of lodging issues.
A lot.
And they're really working on shattering, eliminating shattering. And, in answer to your question further, the university has just got a $10 million grant to move this Kernza forward. And so that tells me that people are really starting to believe in it. And in fact, I was just on a Zoom call this morning where we were talking about the research questions that we want to do in the field based on nitrogen usage and organic livestock manure usage and how it impacts things. And that's part of that grant as well.
It don't have very many leaves, and the ones I see have got some leaf rust on them and some kind of disease. Does that hurt it if the leaves get rusty, or?
It never does have much leaf on it.
Nope.
No. It's a lot like any other prairie grass, Just that stem. And it acts a lot like a prairie grass.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how deep you planted your plant here, but we usually plant it about 1/2 to 3/4 inch deep at the most.
Not very deep.
Right. And it works that way. The thing that I'm talking about diseases, though, we know that it can get ergot in it. And there was some bomb in some of the stuff last year. So I have a thinking that it's going to react to the weather much like wheat does or any other grain. If you got a moist, hot weather, you got a good chance of getting that ergot and that bomb. The other thing we're wondering about is, for example, the ergot or even the bomb, because you don't do any tillage and it's in the same crop for same field for 3 years, is that going to impact the infestation? Trying to find that out.
Yeah.
So there's those questions are.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of, there's a lot of questions, to answer. Just in talking again, so with my little business, I go direct to customer, and there's a lot of interest, I know, in sort of just talking about all the benefits of the crop, and kind of people know about it, so it's, there's just a great story that can be told, and it's really an easy story to tell, and it's a good story to tell, so that's what's fun about it.
Yeah, and I think the last issue of the Farmer magazine did a terrific job of telling the story.
See ya, Pat. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. It's conventional, non-organic. You'd use pretty much regular fertilizer, but you want to be careful not to over-fertilize, so otherwise you could lodge. You get too much nitrogen. What we've done on our field is now, right after we've harvested it, then we've top dressed, just spread over the top. Will be anything between 1,500 and 2,000 gallons of liquid hog manure.
Ooh.
And I like
over the top. Okay.
Over the top, and I like that because then it works itself into the ground good, especially if you can get a rain real fast. But if there's a lot of residue on the ground, that nitrogen and that manure will connect with that and sort of do the composting right there. So that's what we're working on there. We thought, we haven't gotten brave enough, we were thinking that we might knife in to see if it keeps the stand from getting too thick.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah, we haven't
idea.
quite, Luke and I have been talking about, we haven't know if we made the decision yet.
Get Jake to pay for it on a research plot first
Yeah.
before you
There
knife
you go.
your stand, or maybe like a third year stand or something. Because we took 300-400 pounds of Carmen's product from last year, and then distributed that in 5 to 20 pound samples to industry partners. And last I checked, Connie told me it was all gone. So she sent out maybe, do the math, 20, 30 samples out to industry partners from small mid-scale breweries to larger companies, whether it's General Mills or Mondelez or someone else, right? Right down to local bakeries that, want to get their hands on the product. And now they're prototyping products to put in the market, and I know you're thinking about the same thing. I personally think it has a really interesting kind of nutty flavor. I made some Kernza scones, cherry hazelnut Kernza scones with Ben Penner flour. And fed them to the
Kernza, all right.
I fed them to the perennial fun guys, right? Because you got to feed them the message, right?
That's right.
And it was great. I also made a couple other things. I throw some in with my oatmeal, and I actually like that it has a noticeable flavor. It's not. I think we got to get past the just we want something that's tasteless. You're trying to reintroduce something that's distinct, like we talked about in the brewing world, right? With the local small grain. So yeah, I think it's got a earthy, nutty flavor to it. On top of the whole environmental message, I think it has a distinct flavor. That's interesting.
So what I plan to do is I'm gonna help Dan.
Found that almost 80% of the VOM stayed in the hull, which is good news.
That's what Joachim Wiersma tells me too about wheat.
Yeah, so the industry partner we were working with last year didn't want anything coming in the door above 4, knowing that it would come down substantially. So they're set their limit at 2. Ideally, industry partners are going to want to see 1 or less. So there's still your spec.
Well, this year, I'll just say, has been about a perfect small grain growing season. I mean, all the way around.
You guys better
Except for
than
the
us,
heat that we got.
Yeah, you guys even better than us because we got pretty dry in the fill stage, and it cut the yields on even the regular grains. But it looks like good quality. Yeah. And that's always a dry year. The quality is there, not the bushels necessarily.
Yep, that's right.
Oh, this stuff isn't too far away from cutting.
Okay. Yeah.
me know when you cut it. I gotta put you.
You know, 'cause
Let me know when you cut it. I gotta.
Okay, all right, I will. Yeah,
you know, if you get a nice hot weekend, I'll bet you Monday.
Monday or Tuesday. Okay, for swathing.
You're starting to see the curved heads out there. You know, the arches.
Yeah. There's a little bit of variability as I walk through the field. I mean, it's the older stems I noticed. I don't see any right here, but the older stems had kind of a little bit of dried down at the very top of the stem.
Oh,
Of the stem itself.
Okay.
But then the younger ones, the tillers, you know, you see some of these smaller ones, they're still down there, they're completely green. So, but I would, you know, yeah. So you think it'd be around that 22, 25 in a couple of days, 4 or 5 days, something like
Yeah,
that.
I think so.
And we can put it in the bin or in a storage semi-short term at that moisture then about.
You know,
maybe
if it acts like wheat, it seems that if you get a rain and then get a hot day or two right after rain, it seems to come even faster.
Okay.
Now why that is, I don't know, but it does appear, because that's for sure the way it worked last year. Because we were out there, we tried it. I'll bet you it was about in this stage. We thought we could straight cut it with a draper head, and no, it just wasn't going to do it. Between then and 3 days later, we had 30-mile-an-hour winds and 1.5 inches of rain. And I went out there the next morning. I thought, oh, what am I going to see? But it was standing nicely.
Okay.
And then when it got dry enough, it was ready to go. Within 5 days of that first initial attempt, it was ready to go.
What kind? Have you noticed? I don't know what kind of test for. Do you test for protein? Have you been testing for protein at all?
We're not testing for protein right now, but we could easily.
I'm just curious what the.
I know the sustaining grain guys do. I think some of their buyers, I think in the brewery world, want to see protein, which we could do that.
I always
We're
test
paying
my
for the
wheat.
sample, so if you want a protein read, let me know.
Yeah.
I'll say I really appreciate the way you know we don't want to promise this is like some silver bullet magic crop, whatever, right? So I think we're still walking through what you could think of as like a minefield of commercializing a new crop, especially at the world's first perennial grain, right? It's kind of inverting the way we've done or changing the way we've grown basic commodities or grain crops for a long time. So some of those challenges include just the best agronomic practices. We don't know everything yet. We're learning. There's a lot of the processing that's involved is kind of a custom deal. We have some businesses that have formed one called Perennial Pantry. That they're a very interesting group of engineers just over in Burnsville. They've built their own cleaning and dehulling equipment custom for Kernza. They built their own color sorter, which is very interesting. I got some stories on that. But and a number of other challenges just in keeping a hold on supply and demand, like Carmen talked about. I have people that call me from Alberta or from Europe that say, I want to grow 500 acres of Kernza. And I have to say, no. We're giving Minnesota a shot. It's developed here for this climate. The researchers are here. The early growers are here. Let's try to do that. So there's a bunch of challenges. And also in processing, a lot of the material is lost. So you get 800 pounds per acre. Half or more of that is leaving the system in hulls and other material. So maintaining that price point that capitalizes on all those ecosystem services is critical to the viability of the crop. So that was thing number one. And thing number two is that the state is investing in this. And I want prospective growers to know that. The state has invested a lot in the research, but just last year for the first time they invested in the implementation side. So they're really interested in the water quality benefits. The deep, dense root system prevents 95+% of nitrate leaching. So around the state in 3 strategic areas, they're essentially de-risking the crop. So there's a lot of risks going into Kernza. The state's going to assume some of that cost and also invest in growers for some of the ecosystem services. So that doesn't mean over-subsidize something, but it means share the risk. The grower shouldn't bear all the risk on behalf of society. The public is going to benefit. The public should pay as well. So the state is investing in this to at least share the burden with a front-end ecosystem services payment and a back-end kind of like a partial crop insurance, because crop insurance, they want to see 3 years of commercial data that we don't have yet. So still a lot of risk involved, but the state's trying to share that. The university is trying to share